my slides before we start. So I hope the slides are visible to all.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay, thank you. So we'll be discussing few things regarding the development and importance of competitive power markets, and then we'll be looking at some sample case studies also from few countries across, mainly one from India and then few other developing countries, how they have transitioned to competitive power markets. So to begin with, let's try to understand what is the role of this wholesale power market and why this is being more and more emphasized upon in the recent times. So as we understand, when we talk about the electricity sector overall, the sector is overall quite efficient across different countries, as we see. But there is always an endeavor to make it even more efficient, more profitable, and to deliver the goods to the consumer in a better way. So the idea is that with this, that is basically a well-known understanding that if we introduce competition in a market, generally the particular market tends to become more efficient and tends to have more streamlined operations. So that is the same idea here, that the introduction of wholesale competition is a particular, in a particular energy grid or a particular energy market, probably would lead to more efficient operation of the sector and overall benefits to all the different stakeholders. And also the wholesale competition may induce efficiency gains in a restructured power industry, because if you have to compete in a competitive scenario, the operations have to be streamlined and they have to be made more efficient. So overall, it is expected to be like a win-win situation, both for the companies which are involved, the utility companies, the generating and distribution companies, and also the final consumers, leading to the overall well-being of the economy and the country. But if we look at the condition of the developing countries and what is the situation of the power sector in the developing countries, many times we see that the problems which the power sector in the developing countries is facing, those problems are much more basic, so to say, more fundamental in nature. Before one can leap on to a competitive power market, there are a few basic fundamental problems which need to be taken care of. So some of these examples are listed here, like most of the developing countries, these are like common things which the power sector is being plagued with, is like underpricing of electricity, operational inefficiencies of the utilities, and lack of a stable regulatory environment to promote investment. So if these problems, which are characteristic of many of the developing countries and how the power sector operates in those countries, until and unless these problems are resolved, introduction of the wholesale power market might not be a very wise decision to take. So it's always important that first the fundamental problems are cleared, and then when the ground is fertile and ready, then particularly the introduction of the wholesale power markets can be done. So let's first look at these preconditions in more detail, so to say. So whatever are the few conditions which we just had a brief overview of, we'll be discussing that in more detail. Like what are the preconditions which must be fulfilled before the transition to a wholesale power market can be done, so that the inherent power or benefit of a wholesale power market is completely tapped. So we'll just look at this list of preconditions, and we have categorized these preconditions into 4 broad categories. The first category talks about the financial sustainability of the power sector. The second category is about the scale and structure of the generation segment. The third category is about the quality of institutions which are available to oversee the functioning of the complex power market. And fourth is the broader economic, political, and social conditions of the country. So we'll be looking at these 4 preconditions in more detail, and what type of environment or particular condition is expected in a particular power sector before one can make this transition to the competitive power markets. So the first precondition here, as you mentioned, is the financial health of the utilities. So needless to say, the financial health of the power industry is an absolute prerequisite for the introduction of competition. As we understand, we are talking about moving to a more open structure where there is an open competition between the different generating companies, then again, different distribution companies. So it's quite necessary that the distribution utilities, which are the main buyers in the market, they should be creditworthy and financially sustainable. Only then we can ensure that the entire mechanism or the entire market mechanism which is being adopted will be functioning smoothly and in a sustainable manner. Because in the lack of this creditworthiness or financial sustainability, there will be no payment security and confidence in the market transactions will break down. And if that happens, then basically the entire system collapses. Because in any particular scenario, if we take, let's say if we talk about the stock markets or if we talk about the exchange, energy exchange or the power markets, basically the transactions, the market transactions are based on a basic understanding of confidence and security in the operations of the market. So that particular thing needs to be assured, and that basically will be there only when the utilities, the companies which are buying the power, they are having a creditworthiness and financial sustainability. So that's very important, very, like the most important condition regarding the financial health of the utilities. And needless to say, this also needs to have the backing of the government, and the government should be politically committed to closing the revenue cost gap as their first priority, which sometimes is quite difficult, especially if we talk about a democratic setup. Then governments have some other political pressures and different other sometimes other pressures due to which they sort of do not prioritize this particular thing in a very important manner. But gradually we need to move that to that particular regime where it is free from those political influences, and the utility companies should be able to sustain themselves on their own. So payment integrity is needed along with the entire electric supply chain for unbundled power sectors. So that is quite important. And still, as we see the current scenario, the existing scenario in most of the developing countries, this is still is a big challenge because most of the distribution utilities, usually they keep facing arrears from their customers perennially, and in turn they end up having arrears of payment to the generators. So this type of a particular problem, if it is existing in the system, this will be can be quite fatal for switching to a competitive power market regime, because this might lead to a circular debt crisis and leading to the collapse of the entire structure. So therefore, we would like to say that opening of wholesale competition under serious non-payment problems will not be fully effective. And instead of supporting the power sector, if the sector is open to competition with these existing plaguing problems with most of the utility companies, then this can actually lead to the deterioration of the power sector rather than its improvement. And there is a particular example of this which happened around in the early 1990s in Ukraine and some of the other Eastern European and former Soviet Union countries. So specifically in Ukraine, there was this poor enforcement of payments, which led to a crisis where the suppliers or the generators, they received little cash, and the distributors, they were also delinquent, and they were withholding whatever little cash they had. They were not putting it out in the market. So overall, the system went into a crisis zone. So this type of thing needs to be avoided at all costs before one can switch to a competitive power market. So to summarize this particular precondition, we can summarize it this way, that reforms to the distribution segment should be prioritized over introduction of wholesale power markets prior to the achievement of cost recovery. So it's very, very important that until and unless the cost recovery is ensured and the distribution segment is properly structured, before that one cannot really jump to that wholesale power market regime. That is one thing. Then the second precondition here, yeah, there is some input. Okay, so the second precondition is regarding the competition in the generation sector. So, so one side we are looking at the problems or the financial issues with the distribution utilities which need to be resolved, and the other end are the generating companies. And it's also important that the generation sector should also have proper scope and a proper structure so that genuine competition among the different generators can be ensured. So there are few sub-points in this precondition which we'll be discussing upon, and the scope for competition in the generation segment, which is also very, very fundamental for the healthy operation of a competitive regime in the power sector. These are some of the important things which need to be ensured, what is the size of the power system? We'll be looking at that, how that comes into picture. What is the market structure in the power generation segment? How much is the demand supply margin, the competitiveness of the upstream fuel markets, and the absence of transmission bottlenecks. So these 5 points, basically, they underline what type of, what is the state of the generation sector, which needs to be there so as to make a successful switch to the competitive power markets. So let's look at these sub points in more detail. So first point is regarding the size of the power system. And so as we can understand intuitively as well, if we need to have a healthy and very throbbing type of competitive power market, we need to ensure that there are the system size is good enough or big enough that it can sustain our different buyers and sellers. A large number of buyers and sellers can operate in that particular space. So the power system size needs to be large enough to accommodate many buyers and sellers. And usually some ballpark figures are given here. They are not like hard and fast rules, but just sort of thumb rule or sort of experience from different countries. So usually the minimum power system size, which is considered as viable for unbundling of the power system, is considered somewhere around 1000 megawatt. At what point people above this, probably if the system is, if your system is above this size, then basically unbundling might prove to be viable. And for wholesale power market to be operational and to have sufficient room for operation of different buyers and sellers, usually the minimum size or the minimum threshold size, which is assumed, is around 3000 megawatt and above. So if the power system of the country is above this particular thing, then that particular power generation segment can be fertile enough to imbibe different suitable number of buyers and sellers. And here is some trivia around this particular fact regarding how much, what is the experience across different countries. So what we see is that in practice, only around 10% of the countries with small power systems, small power system here means less than 5000 megawatt size. So only 10% of countries having these small power systems under 5000 megawatt have introduced wholesale markets. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum are the bigger countries having larger power systems, having 20,000 megawatt and above size. So out of that pool, around 3/4 or 75% of the countries have switched to wholesale markets. So that this particular data also corroborates this fact that the power system needs to be of a good enough size to sustain the market activities. In addition to the market size, when we talk about the market size, the other thing is that how much openness is there in the market structure. So suppose if there is a new generating company which is coming up and which wants to participate in the wholesale market. So the idea is that the structure of the market or the particular situation of the market should be such that it should be quite open and welcoming. And the new generation companies should be able to enter the market. They should be able to get access to the transmission resources on a non-discriminatory basis. That is quite important because if you are talking about open competition, then the via media, as we know, is the transmission network, and this competitive power market will be able to function only when there is a non-discriminatory access to the transmission resources. And also the new companies should be able to enter into enforceable contracts with new or existing buyers. So not only the size is important, but also the structure of the market should be open and accepting and welcoming to the new participants or the new companies which are coming up. Then another point here is regarding the resource mix and what is the share of the baseload generation plants. So as it mentions here, the potential competition in generation is closely related to the resource mix and the share of inflexible baseload generation plants of the given country. So that is again quite important because if the baseload generation plants, if they occupy a very, very large share of the overall resource mix, then basically it leaves a very small room for the operation of the other players and the market. So it's very important that the share of inflexible baseload generation plants should not be above a particular threshold. They are needed, but they should be in a particular bracket, or let's say not a very large share should not be occupied by these inflexible baseload generation plants, so that there is sufficient room for operation of the other players and for the competition to unfold. Then the third point, as we said, was the demand supply margin. That also is very important when we look at the generation capacity. So because as we understand, if the power scenario is very tight, that means whatever is the available capacity almost entirely is almost matching is the demand. So the entire capacity will always be more or less always be used for meeting the demand. So that doesn't leave any room for competition or any meaningful competition between the buyers and the sellers. So it's very important that there should be sufficient margin between the demand and supply of power. That means the demand of the power, whatever is the demand, the supply of the power must be in sufficient surplus. And only when there is this surplus supply and there is this margin beyond the demand, which is available in a system, only then probably we can see a meaningful competition. Because now because competition thrives only when there is this, there is a limited resource and different suppliers or different service providers are competing for, getting that particular resource or that particular consumer base. So that's very important, and therefore the countries which are facing serious supply adequacy problems, they should address the lack of investment in new generation capacity before they can consider the introduction of the wholesale competition. So this is also quite important from the generation perspective, that there should be a significant surplus of supply over the demand. Only then there will be a room for the competition to unfold and operate meaningfully. Then the fourth point here was regarding the fuel markets. And this becomes much more important when we are talking about a system which is predominantly dependent on thermal power generation. In case of a renewable energy based, or as we are shifting more towards dominance of renewable energy, then this point will probably become less and less significant. But as of now, whatever is the ground reality, as we see still, especially in the SAARC region, if we talk about most of our, except for few exceptions like Bhutan and Nepal probably have a lot of hydropower. But for the larger countries, we see it's basically a lot of reliance on thermal power is still there. And if we are depending on thermal power, then the competitive nature of the fuel markets also plays a very important role. So the fuel availability should be there at competitive prices, and also there should be diversity of fuel supply sources. So because diversity basically is something which is very essential, or it's like the bedrock on which the entire competitive regime will rest. So if you're talking about a system which is dominated by thermal power, then the diversity in the availability of fuel at competitive prices, and also in terms of the different diverse fuel supply sources, needs to be ensured. Only then, the competition will be meaningful and it will be enhanced further, and it will facilitate the entry of new competitors with efficient generating plants. And the last point regarding the generation sector is regarding removing the transmission bottlenecks and vertical integration. So this is also very important because, as we understand, most of our power sectors till few years back or few decades back, it used to be like vertically integrated monopolies only. And over the last few years or a couple of decades, basically, we have been endeavoring for restructuring and unbundling of the power sector. So it needs to be ensured that the vertical integration is sufficiently unbundled, because if there is a vertical integration between the generation, transmission, and the distribution company, so basically there'll be the non-discriminatory access to transmission system will not be ensured. Also, the competition will not be meaningful, because then the distributing company of a particular subsidiary will be only purchasing from the or will prefer to purchase from their particular upstream generating unit itself. So it's very important that this vertical integration needs to be unbundled, and also the transmission bottlenecks need to be removed. There should be a non-discriminatory access to the transmission network. these things should be ensured before we can shift to a wholesale power market and have a meaningful competition. So this is the overview of the preconditions needed on the generation side, which was our second precondition. The third one is regarding the quality of institutions. So as we understand, because when we are shifting to a competitive market regime, the number of transactions will grow exponentially. There'll be a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different generating and distributing companies, and there'll be a lot of different ways in which they'll be interacting through different bilateral contracts or through real-time transactions in a market. So it's very important that there should be a sound regulatory framework which will ensure that the rules of the game are uniform and they are fair to everyone. So people, basically the stakeholders, need to have a confidence that the operational structure or the regime is fair and open for all. So a sound regulatory framework is very important. It will help to reduce risk perceptions and also attract investment and keep the financing costs down. And along with the regulatory framework, another thing comes is the legal infrastructure, because in case there is a dispute or there is a problem, there is an arbitration needed. So the dispute resolution mechanisms and arbitration mechanisms should be rapid, fair, and competent. So only when these things are ensured, then this will give sufficient confidence into the investors to invest in a particular competitive market regime. And then the thing can thrive properly. So having a sound regulatory framework and a sound legal infrastructure for dispute resolution are also very, very integral to ensuring the shift or transition to competitive markets. Then the fourth precondition is the overall economic, political, and social conditions. So as we understand, in any particular particular economy or country, when we are talking about having a particular sort of transition or moving to a more advanced regime, it's very, very important that the overall macroeconomic, political, and social conditions should be very stable and very positive, having a very positive outlook. Because only in a stable macroeconomic and political situation can structural reforms be carried out. And that is like the basic tenet or the basic condition which needs to be met so that the investors have a proper confidence in the system and the entire thing can work. So this is like quite obvious and needs to be ensured, or the condition should be there like that. So these are some of the preconditions which need to be ensured before one can transition to a wholesale power market regime. Now, one more thing was, usually which people talk about when we talk about the wholesale power markets is something known as the regional power markets. So because as we understand, there was a point regarding the size of the power market, which needs to be, or the overall power sector, minimum size which needs to be ensured for the competition to be viable, and also the structure and other details were there. So many times what people find is if let's say if there's a large country, big country, then basically it has sufficient size and structure and scope to sustain a competitive power market regime. But in case there are smaller countries and a lot of different smaller countries which on their own, they can't really support that type of competitive power market regime. But if they form a pool and they form a regional power market, then probably it becomes more sustainable and there's a significant diversity both on the demand and the supply side, which can be there by pooling of the resources of different countries. So that is one concept which is also very popular in terms of the wholesale power markets. And therefore, what we see is that regional integration of electricity markets is a growing trend among developing countries, and it has very promising and potential benefits. If we look at the status of regional power markets across the globe, they are at varying stages of development. So at some places they are, like in the initial stages, usually it starts with bilateral contracts as only, and then gradually as the confidence builds up and the people get used to having a sort of a common structure, then they can probably move to more organized power pools. So we will just look at some examples across the globe regarding the. Okay, before we go to the examples, just to summarize the benefits which these regional power markets can bring. So there have been several studies which suggest that there are significant benefits of cross-border power exchanges, and such regional power markets can be having these substantial benefits. Some of these are listed here. One is arbitrage between high and low cost sources of electricity in neighboring countries. Now that becomes a very interesting thing, because as we increase the number of countries and the diversity in that overall structure, there is a lot of opportunity for this arbitrage type of things, having different sources, a lot of diversity and different cost structures across. Then it helps in optimizing the use of existing resources. The replication of the capacity need not be done so much, and the whatever are the existing resources, they can be used more optimally. And also it improves the supply adequacy and the reliability on the consumer's end. So these are some of the benefits which definitely come with regional power markets. And also, as I said, for smaller countries, this is a big boon, because regional power markets may provide an opportunity for the smaller countries to enjoy some of the benefits of power trade as long as the other conditions are met. So especially from the point of view of smaller countries, this is a very, very welcome or very smart move to a regional power market. So we'll look at some of the examples of regional integration of power markets across the globe. So the first one is from South Africa, the southern part of Africa, and led by South Africa as a nation. So the South Africa power pool has been established for over 20 years with relative success, driven by surplus power from South Africa. And there are large traded volumes from South Africa to its neighbors. However, most of it is still via bilateral contracts. Though there are some short-term markets which are in place, but there is a very little trading which occurs on those markets. Still, it's mostly bilateral contracts. But overall, there is a large trading of electricity across the entire region. Then another example is from the West Africa, the western part of Africa. So there is a West African power pool, which is still to resume market operation at pool level. However, this is also mainly guided by bilateral contracts. And a bottleneck here in terms of evolving from bilateral contracts to a full-fledged market structure has been the slow evolution of regional trading due to lack of transmission links and shortage of generation. So as we said, the infrastructure needs we discussed in terms of the preconditions. We looked at it that there should be adequate generation supply and also the non-discriminatory access to transmission links, or sufficient transmission links should first of all be there. So those are few of the bottlenecks in Western African region which are limiting the growth of the regional market there. Then Central America, if we look at it, so there is a Central American power market, which also has a spot market since quite a few years. And though it has limited volumes which are being currently traded across the borders, however, they are planning for building of a 1200 kilometer Central American power transmission line with around 300 megawatt capacity, which probably will ease the bottlenecks on the transmission side and help in broader integration across that entire region. Then if you look at South America, there is quite an interesting thing going on regarding the regional integration of power markets. So there are around 19 operating bilateral interconnections, and also there are 3 binational power plants. And there are initiatives to integrate the countries from the Andean region, the Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Chile. So along the Andes range of mountains. So there is quite a significant initiative going on there for integration of these different countries and having an integrated regional power market. However, there is some distrust between some neighboring states which obstructs the evolution of electric integration. So that is, as I said earlier, also this is a very, very important thing. An environment of trust and confidence should be there between the different players to ensure this type of transition to an integrated power market. And then if you look at East Asia, then there also we see there is an ongoing integration effort in the greater Mekong sub-region, which comprises of Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, and few provinces of China. There is an ongoing effort of integrating the market overall there. And the trade is envisioned to evolve gradually from PPAs initially to an overall integrated power market in the future. Now coming and also if we talk about EU, the European Union and US, they are actually much more advanced in terms of the integration of the power markets. The EU and particularly the Nord Pool currently are in advanced stages of integration, and they have actually operational regional power exchanges having real-time energy prices and all. Also, in terms of US, we talk about there is a mature regional market in US as well, and however, further regional integration and more transmission interconnection capacity is still needed, and which is being developed upon. Now, coming close to our discussion, as we are talking about the SAARC region, the South Asia, what we see here in the South Asian region, there is currently a lack of long-term commitments, though despite having a large potential benefit of regional integration, especially if we look at the Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, and India market, there is quite a substantial potential which is there, and there is because as we see, the Bhutan and Nepal have a very high hydro potential which is still untapped to a large extent, and there is gas-based generation which can be there from Bangladesh. So there is quite a few potential which is still untapped. However, if we look at our South Asian region, the main problem as we see is the policy, institutional, and political barriers which are impeding the South Asian regional integration in terms of the electricity market. So, and as we know, there are a few issues going on here and there amongst the neighboring countries, due to which there's a lack of confidence and trust. Also, there are some trade restrictive policies, and these are some of the challenges which come up in creating effective. So, along with that, as we see, though SAARC is there, but the ambit of and scope of work which needs to be undertaken for having an operational regional power market probably much more empowered and much more, having a more efficient mechanism for having a regional body which can coordinate the cross-border transfer of power and trading of electricity needs to be there. So basically, it's more of a policy and political issue which basically needs to be undertaken. So needs basically an understanding at a higher level needs to be there, so that these particular confidence building measures can be there and appropriate regional structures can be developed in the South Asian region. And on the technical side, if we talk about in the South Asian region, so the one thing is that the domestic power markets need to be developed still in most of the countries in South Asia. They still have a single buyer structure. We'll come to that shortly. What is that single buyer model? I mean, probably you might be aware, but so evolution from the single buyer model to the domestic power market, that needs to be taken up in the different countries individually at the domestic level. And also across the countries, there should be an harmonizing of the grid codes because if you're talking about integration across the entire region, so it's very, very important and mandatory that the grid codes should be uniform and harmonized. So these are few things on the technical side, but mainly the barrier in the South Asian region is more from the policy and the institutional and political perspective. Talking of that wholesale power markets and the single buyer model, one thing which we can basically look at is that, as we discussed, there are a lot of preconditions for wholesale power markets, and many times it is difficult for developing countries to directly switch from their existing vertically integrated monopolies to directly to a wholesale power market. Usually that is a big shift and not really viable. So usually there is an intermediate stage which is usually talked about and can be very handy for making that transition. So basically from a vertically integrated monopoly, it is much more viable to shift to a single buyer model, and then from a single buyer model gradually one can move to a competitive power market. So when we talk about a pure single buyer model, there is only the existing integrated monopoly in an area which is permitted to buy power from a number of different competing generators, or IPPs as we call, independent power producers. And the IPPs may only sell at regulated prices to the existing utilities which have a complete monopoly over the final customers. So usually that is how the transition occurs, that initially there is diversity or options available. The IPPs are there on the generating side, but in terms of the other structures, the transmission and distribution, it is still integrated, and the existing monopoly or the vertical integrated monopoly has entire rights over all the customers. So usually that is like the first stage. But then gradually one can evolve further from here, and there can be competition which can be undertaken at both the sides in terms of the generator side as well as the other side here. So I think there is some issue here. So someone else has got the control of the sharing. Can
yes,
we can lock the sharing. I mean that except the presenters, no any other person can be able to access it or something. So admin, can you please take a note of it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I hope it's visible again. My slides are visible again. Okay, so talking about this single wire model, this is what we are talking about here. So this is what there are two stages of the single wire model, so to say. So usually from a vertical integrated monopoly, which most of our power systems used to be till a couple of decades back. So usually the first stage is shifting to this integrated version of the single wire model shown on the right hand side here. So as you can see in the integrated version, there is still the vertically integrated monopoly is still there, and it has its own generators, and then there is a single buyer and distribution companies which are selling to the customers. However, there are different IPPs which are now pitching in and selling the power to the same single buyer. So usually that is like the first stage of transition, and then from there gradually one can evolve and shift to the second stage, which is like the disaggregated version of the single bar model on the left hand side here. And in the disaggregated version, as we see now, there are different IPPs which are competing, and on the other side also there are different distribution companies which are finally selling to the customer. And from this type of a single bar model, the disaggregated version, now it is much more easier to make a transition to a wholesale competitive market and having open market regime. So this is usually considered as the intermediate stage before shifting to the wholesale power market. And that's what it says here. The single wire model is considered by some to be a second best to comprehensive restructuring, which allows for gradual transition towards fully wholesale competitive markets. It is a relatively easy to implement interim market structure between vertically integrated monopoly and wholesale competition. And also it could help launch the reform process by showing the benefits of private investment and management. So because usually when we have a vertically integrated monopoly structure, there is a lot of resistance and there is a lot of apprehension in terms of shifting to unbundled structure or to welcoming private investment in the sector. So this type of a single bar model, it acts like an intermediate stage, and also it helps build the confidence of the stakeholders and show to them the benefits of the reform process and the benefits of private investment and management. And gradually, over a few years, one can evolve from there to the final structure, which is the wholesale competitive market. So that's what it says here. Transition from single bar model towards wholesale power markets requires special provisions and cautions. Just for sake of your completion of the discussion, we have put some examples and experiences of a few countries which have made recently made this transition from a single wire model to a wholesale power market. And what are some of the issues which they have faced or how they have handled that particular transition? We have tried to capture briefly here in the next few slides. So the first example of countries transitioning from a single bar model to a wholesale power market, the first example is from Mexico. So Mexico laid the legal foundation for electricity sector reforms in 2013 by doing appropriate amendments in the constitution. Then the market rules were published during 2015 for a complete wholesale power market, and that included a lot of details in terms of what will be the time horizon, the day ahead, hour ahead, and real time type of trading markets, capacity and ancillary markets, all those details were there. What will be the transmission access and financial transmission rights, all those details were also published. medium and long-term capacity auctions, how they'll be handled, and which will be the marketers, what will be their role and their responsibilities, so the entities which are engaging in the transactions without having ownership of generation assets. So all those things were delineated and properly put out in 2015. And however, there has been an issue in terms of the transition which Mexico has been aiming. And people have been pointing out that the problem there is in terms of the partial vertical separation of generation, transmission and distribution. So as we said, this is like one of the key tenets, one of the key principles which needs to be ensured for shifting to a competitive power market regime. Proper unbundling of the vertically integrated structures should take place, which basically people say has not really been undertaken properly in the case of Mexico, and that raises some concerns on discriminatory access procedures by the incumbent state-owned enterprises. So that basically, so this type of things, when there is still a vertical integration existing and non-discriminatory access to the resources, especially the transmission resources, is not provided, that does not help the cause of a competitive market, and the confidence of the investors and private players doesn't really build up. So this is actually one bottleneck in terms of the experience of Mexico, if we look at it. And also their experience has been that whatever is the available capacity or electricity generation which has been there, it almost entire was there before the market regime was adopted. So that is also an issue here, and that's why it has been suggested that there will likely not be any new participants from the supply side in the new wholesale market, because still the open access type of thing has not been assured and the market is still like closed, though they have in letter they have moved, but in spirit actually they have not been able to adapt to that type of an open structure. So that is one example. Another example of countries transitioning, making this transition is from Turkey. So Turkey recently replaced the single buyer model by a wholesale market. And for the transition, they really planned it well, and some of the things which they undertook here are given. So Turkey's transition plan covered procedures for privatizing distribution and generation assets. That is something again very, not really, privatization might be an extreme step, and again, depending upon the ground realities, might or might not be undertaken. But at least unbundling of these structures is quite important. So in Turkey's case, what we see is that they actually went for privatization of the existing assets. And also along with that, they introduced the transitory vesting contracts through which generation, either from existing contracts or from public companies, will be allocated to distribution companies based on their weighted share in total demand to compensate for the demand of captive consumers. So that is something which they ensured that the interests of the distribution companies are also taken care of during the transition phase. So that is something very visionary sort of thing which they adopted. And with those contracts being in place, the main purpose which they want to serve is that it should be able to provide for a smooth transition by ensuring predictability of electricity prices and supply during the transition period. And second is to cover stranded costs that are taken by a public specialized company. So we usually, because when we're talking about a transition from one regime, one structure to another type of structure, the uncertainty or unpredictability which comes up regarding both the supply of the electricity and also the prices at which it will be available, that usually hampers the interests or the benefits of the different stakeholders, and they usually sort of try to back out, or they're uncertain how to go about it. So Turkey has done something good about by introducing these vested contracts to take care of the interests of the stakeholders during the transition period. And that type of predictability really helps in making this transition. Then the third example is from Vietnam. Vietnam has taken a phased approach towards competitive wholesale and retail electricity markets. So the electricity law was enacted in 2005, and that established a single buyer market, which started from 2010 onwards. The single buyer sells power to discoms and large consumers at regulated prices. This market structure is planned to evolve into a pool with multiple buyers and sellers. So they are going along the typical route, as we said, from vertically integrated, entirely vertically integrated monopoly to next stage is the integrated type of single buyer model, and then gradually evolving to the disaggregated single buyer model. So that is the route which they have been adopting, and currently generation prices are the largest component of the retail tariff. At present, there is little possibility for reducing these through operational efficiency, as 90% of sales are covered by long-term financial PPA contracts. The prices of these PPAs are not transparent and have been negotiated between generators and the government. So that is something again which goes against one of the fundamental principles which we discussed earlier in this session, was regarding the structure of the generation segment. And if most of the generation segment is already, having these fixed long-term financial contracts, it really leaves a very small room for the market to operate in. So that is one of the experiences which they have here. So special tariffs apply to renewable generation, small hydro plants, providing preferential pricing for renewable power. So however, for promoting renewable, they have provided some special tariffs to promote the renewable in their new regime. So there was a few examples of countries which are still making that transition. And now just sharing one last example, case study from India, because India we can consider as one of the success stories in making this type of a transition and gradually evolving from a vertically integrated monopoly structure to single buyer model to finally having the real-time exchanges, energy exchanges and operational things that way. So this has been a really good development in India over the last couple of decades mainly. And this, as we can see in this figure, we gradually evolved and now we are having spot trading on exchanges as well. So this has improved the overall efficiency and liquidity of the power sector and has been really beneficial in terms of the experience of all the stakeholders. So how did India achieve this transition? Just some key points from that journey we'll just highlight. So mainly it started, though in the 1990s, 1998 around, there was this Electricity Regulatory Commission Acts and the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission and the State Electricity Regulatory Commissions were set up. So that was, like you can say, the beginning, but the major change which came up was through the Electricity Act of 2003. And this was like a very landmark turn in the evolution of the power sector in India. And this Electricity Act of 2003 really brought a lot of new and very, very innovative ideas into the Indian power sector. And it opened up the market, so as to say, and the unbundling and the restructuring of the power sector was ensured in a very drastic way by this particular thing. So the intent of the act was to promote competition by freeing all possible avenues of procurement and sale of power. There are a lot of clauses in this Electricity Act which worked toward this direction of freeing up of the procurement and sale of power. So like generation was delicensed, then development of multi-buyer, multi-seller market in power was envisaged here. The trading of electricity as a licensed activity was introduced here, and also non-discriminatory open access to transmission and open access in distribution was introduced in principle through this Electricity Act of 2003. And also there was this, it was ensured it was envisaged that there will be autonomous regulatory commissions which will overlook the functioning of these power markets. Then further, there were a few more changes which were introduced in the policy structure. So in 2004, the country came up with open access regulations. And so through that, it was ensured that the transmission capacity should be available in an open access manner to all the different stakeholders involved. And the long-term and short-term access, the different clauses for those were defined. And the short-term open access was granted on inherent margins, which is also very, very important for the market to operate. Then there were these power exchange guidelines, which were introduced in 2008. Which defined what an power exchange is, what are its roles and regulations, and what are the rights which it will have. And the transactions were categorized as bilateral or collective, that means through a power exchange. The transmission charges were delineated. And then in 2010, we had the power market regulation, which brought about the further clarity about the operation of the power market. And the role of power exchanges was defined, and norms for setting up and operating of the power exchanges were further clearly set up and defined. And it was envisaged that the CERC will be the approving body for setting up a power exchange. So it has been a really landmark thing since then, and the Indian Energy Exchange, which is the most popular in a power exchange in India, that had started its operations in around June of 2008. And since then it has grown really in a big way. And currently out of the entire energy exchange, the market, the real-time market, which is there for energy, lion's share is done on this Indian Energy Exchange. And there is more than 5,000 megawatt of average daily trade. There are more than 6,000 participants. And this is growing further because, as we know, in the last few years, especially in the last 5-7 years, the government's focus has been very predominantly high on renewable energy, and we are seeing a lot of renewable energy projects have come up. And in future, again, we see there is a very well laid out plan as well. So as these number of RE generators are going on increasing, this particular thing is becoming more and more dynamic. And there is actually a lot of sufficient surplus margin in terms of supply, which we have in India over and above the demand which is there. So the situation is quite positive, and looking towards the future, we can say that probably this will evolve further and go towards a having a much more larger share as well in terms of the overall electricity demand. So to summarize this entire discussion for today, some of the key points to take away, the conclusions or the key takeaway points are just highlighted here. So first of all, one thing is that we understand that wholesale power markets are likely to further enhance the efficiency in the restructured power industry. And that is one of the reasons why most of the countries are aiming to transition, or they are already in that transition somewhere along that evolutionary path of transitioning to a wholesale power market. Then a second thing which we discussed in detail was regarding the developing, the preconditions which are needed for setting up the wholesale power market. And we saw that the developing countries still need some groundwork before the suitable conditions can be there for setting up of a wholesale competitive power market regime. So we discussed those preconditions in detail and some of the things which need to be taken care of before the ground can be fertile for transitioning to a wholesale power market. Then third thing we discussed in more detail was regarding the regional power markets and how that can be a very interesting way out for, especially for smaller countries. It can be really a boon, and they can participate together in a pooled regional power market and simultaneously have the benefits of having what come with a wholesale power market. Then another point which we discussed was regarding how this transition process can be undertaken in a phased manner, and from the vertically integrated monopolies, gradually the shift can be towards an integrated single buyer model, and then further to a disaggregated single buyer model, and then finally to a wholesale power market. And this type of a phased transition can be really achievable and also very, very good in terms of demonstrating the benefits of the reforms in power sector, and thus earning the confidence and trust of all the different stakeholders as we move along that process. And finally, we looked at some of the examples of different case studies of countries which are in the process of transition and at different stages in this transition from the your vertically integrated structure to a single buyer model to a wholesale power market. So we looked at some of those case studies, and so that's it. These are some of the references which you can refer further for more elaborate study on these particular topics. So thank you so much. That was it from my side for this session. Any questions or inputs are welcome.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Ridan Singh, for this wonderful presentation. And indeed, it was very detailed one. And specifically, I mean, the way you talked about this historical development and status of competitive markets in SAARC region and even outside the SAARC region. And also, you have shedded light on this importance for establishing a quality competitive power markets, specifically in context of RE dominated scenarios. So thank you so much. So now the floor is open to the question and answers, and we already have three participants raising hand. I can see that. So we can start first with Mr. Gul Hassan Bhutto. Kindly, if you can, once you ask the question from the a presenter, you can all tell about yourself, your designation, and then you can ask the question. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ali, and then Professor. I think at the outset, I must appreciate that the session way has been organized is really wonderful. I mean, I was earlier under the impression that that would be a kind of a conventional training for the conventional PPs. That's wonderful. That's touching to the market, which is the need of the time. So wonderful presentation. We expect that we would be having this copy of the presentation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you'll be having it. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
That's
This will be available to you, and also the recording.
That even the recording too.
Yes. Yes, both things will be available to you. I mean, once the session will end.
Since the professor was highlighting the wholesale market, my precise question is whether the professor is talking about the system operator to the extent of the wholesale market opening to the balancing level at the system operator level, and then market participant system operator level are the limited choice to certain bulk consumer. Number 1 point. Wholesale definition with respect to market participation as a market participator level, whether the trader, supplier, or a generator can participate at the wholesale level, or the professor is referring to even the choice to retail consumers or to eligible consumers or non-eligible consumers. Number 1. Number 2, follow to that one, the professor into the through the talk shall have spoken about the wholesale market opening for the developing countries, since the we consider bulk power consumer as a cash cow. The other small consumers are the subsidized by the government. So probably the choice is given to that one. Government need to liberate and then opens up the retails. Would he be able to give us certain examples which countries has opened up with the retails? What were their success stories and experience, and those which countries they opened up with the wholesale market? Since you said the introduction, I have to come up earlier. My name is Guleshan Bhutto. I'm an advisor to the power market at the NEPRA. So experience globally with the wholesale and retail markets. Somewhere we learned that the wholesale market opened first. Later on, we learned that in some countries the wholesale market opened first. Where are these success stories? And what level, and how much journey if they started with the wholesale? Number 3rd part is if they started with the wholesale, ideally or generally, for sure, ground realities varies. How long this journey takes to liberalize to the retail market, 5, 10 or 20 years? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Guleshan Bhutto, sir. Would you like to, Professor Redhan, would you like to address that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Bhutto, for your very interesting comments. So yeah, very correctly pointed out, when we are saying about wholesale power market, basically the experience as of now across most of the countries has been that we are talking about the utilities or very large consumers, industries and all, which are participating in that type of a trading thing. So when we talk about the current experience across most of the countries, it is mainly in terms of the utility level interactions. But in the future, the futuristic thing is about involving the retail consumers. And again, what I would say is that there is no hard and fast like one, like a boundary line sort of thing. It's more like a spectrum. So gradually it can evolve further and further. The granularity of the level of consumer which can be involved in the market probably will increase as the experience grows. But as of now, it's only basically the utility level. One thing which we are talking about in futuristic manner, it's at least at the research stage, is in terms of the transactive energy systems, which are really, as of now, they are not really on ground. They are not existing, but they are a concept which is there, and probably they are being experimented upon in some portions of US. Pacific Northwestern National Lab, PNNL, is one of the organizations which is leading that particular debate and that particular concept. And if it becomes a possibility, the transactive energy implementation, then possibly we can see this thing going down to the very retail consumers as well. So, the thing like a prosumer, which we talk about. So different consumers having their own renewable energy setups, they are interacting in the grid in a real-time manner, selling or buying electricity as the market changes, or as the prices change, or as the time of the day changes. So that thing is still a sort of futuristic from perspective of developing countries, we would say. But for sure, that will be coming down few years down the line. Now, how much time it would take, as you said, I think that is probably, again, that depends on a lot of dynamics about the technology probably will be there very soon, but I think it's more of the existing political and social realities in our developing countries which put a constraint on that, and probably that is a more difficult question to answer, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think the question has been addressed. Next, I would like to take the question from Mr. Faisal Sharif. Please, Faisal, go ahead and ask the question, please.
Thank you, Ali, for giving the opportunity. Thank you, Dr. Ridham. I think it was a wonderful, comprehensive presentation. My name is Mohammad Faisal Sharif, and I'm working as a Director of Projects in PPIB, which is a government implementing agency for policies and projects, as Director of Projects. So my question is, like you have mentioned few prerequisites for a developing country like Pakistan and some other countries. So if we go by these prerequisites, of course, we have these peculiar economic infrastructure issues. We have issues with the financial sustainability of the dispose of the sector. We have issue with the computation and generation side because we have long-term projects, and then we have socio-economic issues. So if we look at these issues, then what could be the starting point for transforming from single buyer model? Right now we are at single buyer model, and we have started developing market. So my question is, if we look at these prerequisites, then might be we never can start a journey towards the competitive markets. So how do you see these prerequisites, especially for of course, these are for the developing countries, but if we look at these, then there'll be no starting point. So what I want to ask that then how we can move away from this traditional system towards the competitive markets, keeping in view all these issues.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Sharif. Yeah, that's a very, very important question that it seems like an unending cycle, and where to start, where to make the intervention. So if we look at especially the Indian example, I think there are 2-3 things which basically can act as the game changers in such a scenario. One is basically setting up of an independent regulatory regime. So that is something very important, which basically India started in 1990s, late 1990s. And having, I mean, again, there will be impediments, and because usually it is a politically sensitive decision to free up the entire power sector from political clutches. But maybe it can be a gradual thing, but moving towards independent regulatory regime is definitely one thing which is very, very important for setting the ground rules. Second thing is unbundling of the vertically integrated structures. That I think can also be taken up as one of the initial things. And the third thing which it comes to mind is the IPPs. So ensuring a particular open structure which is more welcoming towards IPPs and providing them a level playing field. I think these are few interventions where we can start with. So basically the change will come from top and gradually it will percolate to the bottom. Actually, that is the type of thing which I see as a feasible thing.
Right. I hope that addresses.
I hope that addresses your question, Faisal. So next, I would like to take a question from one of the female participants, I guess it, Ms. Maria Rafiq. As I see your hand raising, please go ahead and introduce yourself, followed by your question.
Yes, thank you. This is Maria Rafiq. I'm a legal advisor in NEPRA. Just followed up with the Faisal's question. Because there are certain preconditions Professor Ridham mentioned. It was very comprehensive and very engaging presentation. Thank you for that. So one of the preconditions which is of concern to me is like the financial health of the utilities. So do you think if this is the foundation that we need to take into account before starting up the market? Because you have mentioned like how India started and everything. So Do you think with the financial health or the because that's what we as a regulator have received reports from different utilities. So if that would be a problem to start up with the market, are we going towards a better solution, or with the problem before us, we would be in a position to have an effective market with these financial health issues that we are having right now?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rafiq, for your input. So there was some issue in the question due to the network quality, but what I probably understand is you're saying that should we wait for the financial health of the distribution utilities to improve, or there can be some midway, I guess, something related to that probably.
So can we basically, I want to ask, like, let's assume we do have financial health issues with the utilities. Can we just start the market? Because I understood from your presentation that that's a precondition, like, with these, this is the main issue we have. And even then we start up with this, single buyer to a multiple buyer seller market. So would that be feasible for us?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think, basically we cannot really wait for it to be 100% good. I mean, it won't be a perfect scenario at any point, but or maybe it will take a lot of time to reach a perfection thing. But one thing we need to, I think, ensure is that there should be some things which should be put in place from the policy side to stem the rot, basically. So if it is like, let's say the distribution utilities are in perennial losses and it's a very, very problematic scenario, so we cannot really overnight transition to the competitive market. We need to do something about it. Few things which can be done is basically, one is the unbundling of the these things, and instead of having the SEB type of, like in India, we used to have the state electricity boards, which were not really, not really answerable to anyone, and they were having a lot of lack of responsibility that way. So basically making it like a company type of structure, competitive structure, corporatization of the distribution utilities, and also putting in some particular clauses for ensuring the proper recovery of revenue, cutting down on the theft and the other AT&C losses. I think some measures need to be taken, and a proper level of health of or financial health of distribution utilities need to be assured before we can actually take that step. So definitely it won't be like they have to be in perfect health before you can take that thing, but some particular measures need to be some corrective steps need to be taken, some policy initiatives need to be taken before we can really hope for making the transition.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Rhythm Singh, for addressing this question. So I would like to take,
allow me for one more question.
Sir, I will definitely do that, but please let me first take the question from Mr. Ebrar Malik. I can see his hand raised from a long time now. So, Mr. Ebrar, go ahead. Please go ahead, introduce yourself and ask the question, please. Yes, Mr. Ebrar, are you there with us?
I think, Mr. Ebrar, you're muted.
Yeah.
You're muted.
I'm Ebrar Malik. I'm working as a joint director hydropower in private power infrastructure board of the government of Pakistan. Thank you, Dr. Singh, for a nice presentation and thought-provoking as well about the preconditions. My precise questions are two. One is I just want to know from your experience and knowledge that how the renewable energy sources, for example, wind, solar, and hydropower, go under the competition, because hydropower is relatively expensive. So how it can be put in the system in the competitive scenario. And my second question is that how the surplus power is adjusted in the system, whether it is put to the consumers to afford this burden, or the government takes some type of subsidy. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ebrar. So yeah, it's a very interesting question actually, and we here in IIT Roorkee, we are also in the Department of Hydro and Renewable Energy. So that is something which is of very much interest to this department as well. And when we look at it, that the other renewable energy resources, they are especially solar and wind, if we talk about, they are quite competitive and they are sort of competing with conventional generation. But whereas hydro usually is having still a higher cost that way. So One thing is that when we talk about these markets, there is something of an ancillary market as well. So it's not just the energy prices, right? Rather the other ancillary services which can be provided by the generators, which can make a difference. And hydropower, I think, has an edge there in terms of the balancing effect which it can bring to the grid. And also along with that, I think that there is still an ongoing discussion in terms of the implementation agencies of the markets, that how much monetization or monetary value to put to these grid balancing services and the ancillary services. So I think that particular regime needs to evolve, and that is very, very mandatory as well, because when we see solar and wind or other variable renewable energy resources, which are increasing in share. So probably that role of ancillary services will become more and more important in the coming future. So I think that once that clarity is there in terms of the policy makers regarding the monetary value of ancillary services, then probably hydro will definitely find a much more valuable uptake in the competitive segment.
Thank you. I hope.
My second question is yet to be answered. About the surplus.
I'm sorry, what was that? Yeah, what was that?
About the surplus energy.
Could you please repeat that again? I'm sorry, I missed it.
I requested to let us know how the surplus energy, for example, 5,000 megawatt, 10,000 megawatt is surplus is kept for the system to avoid any leakages or breakages in the system. How that is dealt? Is it passed to the consumer? For example, I would say for 10 years, we have 5,000 megawatt additional capacity as a factor of safety. So how that will be dealt in financial terms, whether the burden of that will be passed on to the consumer, the government gives some subsidy.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's also a very, very important question. Yeah, so I think that is also linked to the previous question. As far as I understand, we cannot really monetize everything only in terms of the energy which we are generating from the different existing resources. So as you said, in terms of the reserve margin which we are having, or you're already having that facility, I think those things also should be monetized. And I guess it's very, very important, especially if we look at the increasing share of variable renewable energy resources. Such margin or the reserve margins which are there, they are very, very crucial and important. But I think in the current paradigm, we only are focusing on the energy costs. That is something which is probably limiting the entire discussion. So I guess it should evolve to that stage where the reserve margins should also be evaluated, and there should be a mechanism for providing a monetary value or revenue for that particular service as well. Yeah.
Okay, Gul Hassan Bhutto Saab, please, you have just like 1 minute. You can comment or you can ask the question, and then we'll move to a short 10 minutes break.
I mean, how the Professor Singh sees when he speak about the VIU structure debundling. I'm especially asking that what's the practice being observed globally in where the markets have opened, especially to the downstream in the distribution side. Whether they have been given in order to make success of the open access, non-discriminatory open access, are the distribution companies restricted to live to the wire and pole business? Or they are doing initially also a supply business also? If they are having whether as a regulated supplier or whether as a supplier of last resort, we feel that that's the a service provider working as a market participant also are in a conflict of interest. If somebody else is coming as a competitive supplier for that network, definitely that has a market power. The wires and poles and infrastructure with the distribution company having the supplier role also as a market house. Professors see this conflict of interest and what has globally been best practice in this regard. Definitely in VIU structure in the start, there might be, and what the India is doing currently on that one and other markets that you have seen it, how they are thinking ahead, wrote down the legal separation of a supply and distribution business, and where their supply is already there, and what are the issues observed and bottlenecks or barriers to the competitive supply. Number one. Number two, like I think Ali Afrain from PPIB was basically asking about the stranded cost and cross subsidy. Like when you are in a VIU structure, definitely you have a demand supply balance, and you have procured the energy for the at least midterm 5 years ahead, wrote the down for the demand forecasted in a particular area. The point where you open the market, definitely that demand defected and went for the other market participant. Therefore, you have a surplus. By that surplus, there is a natural stranded cost to the, that government or something. So there are different approaches globally, and what has been largely adopted, whether the stranded cost and cross subsidy is a standard application on the competitive consumers, or those who are shifted to the bilaterals and altogether, are they have the waiver, something like that one. So two questions, one to the professor to highlight to the network and supply business conflict of interest, and other to the cost treatment on the cross subsidy, and then extended with respect to the market.
Yes, Professor Rhythm Singh, can you quickly answer those questions, or it'll take some time, right?
Yeah, no, I'll try. So yeah, the first question actually regarding distribution side and having an open access on distribution side, that's very interesting question. And I think still that open access on distribution side is not really very much there in most of the countries what we see, because as you correctly pointed out, that a particular utility who has invested into a particular infrastructure, and how can they open up for their competitors? I think that's a very pertinent question. And also, if I recall, in some time back in India, in Mumbai, there was some litigation between two distribution utilities regarding the high-paying, once they opened for the competition, the high-paying consumers shifted from one particular utility to the other utility, and because there is a thing of cross-subsidy in our power systems, so the poorer consumers are left with the previous utility. So that type of thing is definitely a very big challenge. I think that's more of a regulatory question as well, how to address the losses once you open up this type of a thing. In an ideal scenario, what I would say, in a utopian scenario, so to say, basically in the developing context, is that if we can do away with the cross subsidy type of structure and price the consumers at a real price, how much they are consuming, that would definitely be an easy way out. But in the given scenario, I don't think that is something which is achievable immediately. So for the time being, I think there should be some regulatory framework for dealing with these, the moving of the high-paying consumers from one particular utility to the other utility. I think that needs to be evolved. That particular mechanism needs to be evolved. And also one thing which comes to my mind is, because when we talk about the transmission system, that there is a transmission utility which is sort of just acting as the caretaker or maintainer of the infrastructure and providing access to the different companies for wheeling the power through them. So I think something similar on similar lines might be developed for distribution sector as well in the future, if we really want to have an open access in distribution. So these are just some thoughts from my side. I think it's a tough question to answer in a regime having cross subsidies and the complex payment structure from the different consumers.
Thank you.
So I think now with this we can take a break. Thank you so much between Mr. Bhutto and for asking such a question, and thank you so much Professor Rhythm Singh for addressing this very thoroughly. So anyhow, now we can proceed we'll take a short 10 to 15 minutes break, and perhaps we'll be back in 15 minutes. And then we'll be starting up with our next second session. That is basically we'll be discussing on some of the models of RPPA and also the strategies for design and regulation of those models. So stay tuned and let's have a 15-minute short break, and then we'll be back by here at Pakistan. We'll be back by 4 p.m. So you can see and check in the respective times what it will be. Thank you so much. So we'll be back in 15 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Khalid.